This video is for Macbeth, as the description and the title say. And it is going to start with the idea that the role that you give virtue is going to affect how much your actions are controlled by virtue. I don't know, it's just like virtue is going to have some effect on you as a human, but your recognition of what virtue is doing changes that. So let me just give the example that is in Macbeth. Macbeth thinks that he has this ambition and that is pushing him forward, and then virtue is this thing that's trying to hold him back, like the law is commonly viewed as being. Like, I would be going 100 miles an hour, but the law says I'm only allowed to go 60, so that I'm going 60. It's this restraint with the motivation to obey it is punishment and consequence. And so Macbeth says, well, like early on, well, I want to kill the king, and that would be like really pushing forward and to become king, and that would be a really good thing. But I have this law of virtue working against me. But it doesn't work in convincing himself not to do it, because he considers it's worth the risk of the consequences, or he even says it is worth the consequence of going to hell. Not even just the risk of it, like he knows he'll go to hell for it, but he's okay with that because it's just a consequence, and he's like quantified it, and now he says, okay, being king for this time will be worth it. Of course, we would say he's mistaken and foolish about that, but I want to say even more than that. He's given virtue an appropriate role. Virtue ought to be not a restraint, like a chains, but the straight and narrow path. All that the ambition that he has can be used for good to its fullest without restraint. It's just not in this way. You should not be king in this way. Yeah, like at the beginning of the play, he's using it well because he's conquering armies and stuff and being a good general, but then he uses it badly. So the core idea is, I think, what Shakespeare's showing in Macbeth is that your beliefs about virtue can either strengthen or weaken your desire to walk or to be virtuous according to the appropriateness of it. And so there's sort of a casting off of the old law of the Old Testament and a putting on of the law of Christ in the New Testament, and that it's not about a bunch of stipulations. It's not about, oh, there's a rule, don't kill your king. It's about doing good, walking the right path, whatever that is, and that it could be any number of things, and that there's a set of rules isn't going to be enough. Because again, it's not about restraint, it's about proper expression, appropriate expression. Yeah, so there's a bit of you see in the failure of Macbeth, the failure of Israel, the mistaken use of the law, mistaken use of, or misunderstanding of virtue. So, yeah, I don't think the law was meant to be used that way, but we use the law in that sense very often. And so the synthesis there is, I think, similar to a lot of Old Testament. I think there's a lot of Old Testament connections one could make with Macbeth. Synthesis: the law is not a restraint, but the law guides you to the best path, where you can be happiest, where you can have more full living, where you can be kinder, where you can love others better. That's what the law is intended to do. But when it becomes chains, You just have to cast it off sometimes, I think, and use a different system. So from the goodness of Ruth to the badness of, I don't know, First and Second Kings. Okay, and I'm wanting to tie this into masculinity, which is of course a big theme in the play, in that I think Lady Macbeth in particular is abusing the role of masculinity, in that it is not, she's replacing what virtue should be doing with masculinity, and I mean, not a great understanding of masculinity, but even just what she thinks of masculinity is putting it into the wrong role, because it's saying, look, this is masculinity, and you need to seek after it, and this will be your way of life, and you should murder people because that's the masculine thing to do, and that is wrong because what is masculine? I mean, masculinity isn't supposed to be the end goal or the holy grail of one's life. It's just virtue is supposed to be that. Seek after virtue, seek after godliness, seek after righteousness in Christ and all that. But being masculine is just one distinction, one nuance in the Christian life. Far better to be virtuous and fail to be properly masculine than have a lot of masculinity and fail to be virtuous. Masculinity is a very subordered thing under virtue. I might even say that masculinity is supposed to be more like the law. That masculinity basically just says, okay, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, do this. And that's what it means to be masculine, to be a man. In more of the sense that Lady Macbeth is talking about. Like, she might get the laws. She doesn't just get the laws wrong, she makes it the way of life, and it should just be a set of rules that are set up, I don't know, as guidelines for how to be a good man, because yeah, it's not meant to be the goal. It's just one little thing on the way to virtue. And it's more of a culture thing that changes a lot, but it is can be, what it means to be masculine can be put into a set of rules more easily, I think. It's not like you're walking in the way of the spirit, which can change dramatically in application. What it means to be masculine is kind of a set thing for each culture. And if Macbeth were to stop and say, is it a rule of masculinity that I should murder people? No, that's not a masculine thing to do. But ambition as a way of life and as goal and an application of total pursuit of power is more of a way of life kind of thing. Oh yeah, if that's what it means to be masculine, and that's the way I should be treating it, then yes, I will murder this person. So I think that in general, flip-flop core idea is, I mean, the actual core idea is pretty simple, but I think the application of it in Macbeth is very interesting. It's not just that your understanding of what virtue is, your understanding of what masculinity is important for doing these things, but putting virtue, as you understand it, into its proper role and relationship to your life, and masculinity in the same way is itself important, maybe even more important, because even if I have a very fleshed out understanding of what it means to be virtuous, what actions count as virtuous, if I don't understand that it's not a set of rules, but a character, like I've been saying, a way of life, then it's not going to affect me properly. Even if I know the law super well, if I treat it as a restraint and not as a path of love, the superior way of living that lets you be more yourself and more good and more happy, then I'm going to be miserable and it's not going to succeed in guiding me. Yeah, so that's the core idea here. Not just virtue, not just the idea of something, the understanding of something, the application, I guess just the application of it, the proper role of it is essential for it to function in your life as it's supposed to.